last Friday night contain a toxic chemical called vinyl chloride.
Vinyl chloride.
Vinyl chloride.
Classified as a carcinogen, highly combustible.
Linked to cancer.
Crews announced they were putting a plan into motion to release toxic chemicals from those 5 cars in order to reduce the threat of an explosion.
They went around and evacuated residents within.
This has been a deeply traumatic experience for this wonderful community. All the tests of the air and the soil and the water have thus far shown repeatedly that things are safe.
As soon as I pulled in my driveway, the smell was overwhelming. I immediately started coughing. My eyes started watering. They told people that they could come home and that it was safe. When I got out of my car and I looked over, you could see the chemicals in the creek. My daughter is 3 years old. There was no way I was taking her back into that house knowing that it was contaminated.
Wow.
Look at all that.
Look at it.
We were shocked when we showed up. The narrative was it was all contained, there wasn't any health risks. Neither of those were true based on our initial testing.
The contamination was not contained to the derailment site. There was contamination blowing into the air and being spread out into the community. There was also contamination in the creeks moving downstream, like miles downstream. The government agencies were telling communities that everything's safe, the air is safe, the water is safe, they haven't found anything. But the fact of the matter is there was barely any data available to them.
We've been on the ground. We have gathered a group of 10 independent researchers who are doing their own testing. We are getting grants to pay for that. We have helped bring in groups that have air purifiers, water, all these things nonprofits are doing to take care of the people of East Palestine, which actually should not be happening because our government should be actually doing that.
I want to thank everybody that came here to show support. Right now, even people that aren't comfortable using their voices need to speak out. We need to come back together as a community, and we need to fight this.
Okay, so by a show of hands, how many people have had health symptoms since the derailment? How many people have had serious health effects since then?
People were covered in rashes. They were having nausea, vomiting, upper respiratory issues.
Multiple people were going to the ER, actually having burns, chemical burns on their lungs.
It was very public that people were sick, and yet it was still not mentioned.
How many people are uneasy about their city or well water? How many people have trust in the EPA? How many people have trust that NS will make it right?
When the officials made the data public, we quickly realized that they had talked for 3 weeks about testing drinking water and the drinking water is safe, and it turns out they weren't testing for all the chemicals that were on the train. The actual testing plan that was developed by Norfolk Southern never planned to test for the chemicals of concern on the train. Multiple agencies within the state reviewed that plan. The county reviewed that plan. The US EPA reviewed that plan. All of these agencies didn't force, compel, require Norfolk Southern to test for all the chemicals on the train for the first 3 weeks of the response. I would say that there was an absolute abject failure at all levels of oversight in government.
DeWine was sipping water from East Palestine. The EPA was saying everything is fine. The devastation that Norfolk Southern has caused has not even been revealed at this point.
In a meeting, I asked the EPA, why did you sign off on this open burn of vinyl chloride? The chief of staff for EPA Region 5 said EPA never signed off on the decision to burn vinyl chloride, which is deeply disturbing. My educated guess is Norfolk Southern wanted that busy rail corridor open as quickly as possible. I think the governor of Ohio listened to the rail company more than public health experts. And the heartbreaking thing is that there really was no need to do that mass burn.
We need Governor of Ohio, Mike DeWine, to immediately declare a disaster in East Palestine, Ohio, so that we can seek full support from the federal government.
Right now, Norfolk Southern's kind of owning this process of what resources people can get, the type of testing they can get, and I think that's really dangerous. If we are letting these train companies and these large corporations do things like this, what does that say about the future for future Americans?
There's a lot of work that needs to be done in East Palestine, and I think that we as a community need to show up to where he works at and demand him to do what we need him to do.
I suffered with infertility my entire life. I was 42 years old when I found out that I was pregnant with Kyla. I moved back home so that I could raise her in the community that I was raised in. These chemicals cause infertility, and the thoughts of my daughter struggling to have children the way that I struggled, knowing what I went through, it breaks my heart. You know, my daily routine is usually putting my phone on speaker and reach out to the independent scientist and stay on top of finding answers. I want my daughter, I want my nieces, I want them to know that I fought for them, that I just didn't lay down and give up. It would be so much easier to lay down and give up and pretend like everything's normal, but I can't do that. I can't do that because of my child.
Home is a place that we felt safe. We all thought that we were going to stay here, raise our kids, because it was a safe environment. Now we use bottled water in our house because we can't trust our village water. Oh my goodness. Oh. My son David, he's 7 years old. I envision for my son a home that he doesn't have to worry about being poisoned. I can remember David coming home from school, and his school, they talked about the train derailment, and he said, "Dad, like, people are getting sick. What are we gonna do?" And that was another reason that we made sure that we were in this fight. The train derailment and what's happening in East Palestine is a direct correlation with what's going on with plastics as a whole in our country. Most of those cars on the train that were hazardous materials were going to make plastics. We are allowing this industry to poison us. Judith, how are you doing today?
Good.
I'm so glad we got to connect. I hear that you're going to be going to the EPA.
We've launched a petition, a public petition, urging the US Environmental Protection Agency to use their legal authority to ban vinyl chloride.
I really want to be a part of this. Like, we really want to be involved, especially with the crazy things that happen in East Palestine, and they are directly affected by, you know, the fight that you're getting ready to fight.
Vinyl chloride is a very toxic chemical. It is widely used in the production of plastic. But plastics really are not cheap when you look at the enormous environmental and health damage done by plastic. It's just a matter of who pays. The people of East Palestine and Pennsylvania are paying dearly.
Something that goes through just about every community in the United States create a serious danger to our health and welfare every single day. People who live in communities closest to these facilities and to the railroad tracks are more likely to be low income, are more likely to be Black, brown, or indigenous, and are more likely to have suffered from historic and systemic impacts from climate pollution.
Plastics and fossil fuels and chemicals are causing tremendous damage to our planet. They're making the climate crisis worse. So the safest thing we can do is reduce the massive amount of chemicals that are moving all over the country by rail to make plastic. I cannot overstate how immensely important a ban on vinyl chloride in the United States would mean for communities. So working with our partners, most importantly, residents in East Palestine and nearby communities, we decided to meet with EPA staff who have the authority to make this important decision.
So we need a group of people. I'm hoping we can get about 10 to 15 people in the gallery while the house is in session and actually do some disruption. So is there anyone who would want to volunteer? We got one. This has been one of the biggest things that we've ever put together, this action. Yes. Our target is Governor DeWine. Like, that is our big target.
Maybe do like one at a time, right? Disrupt, leave a minute or two, and just keep it going as long as possible.
There's a group that's going to go over before, that's going to get to the gallery. They're actually going to disrupt session. The rest of our group, we're going to go to the rotunda and start chanting. So I think you should go into the gallery because I know you're not afraid to you're not afraid to speak your mind.
This way, guys.
Our kids are being poisoned. Bloody ears, bloody noses, and no one will help us. Declare an emergency, Governor DeWine. Put your hands on her. Don't put your hands on her. Do not put your hands on her.
DeWine, it's time. Declare an emergency. All you politicians, we are going to make sure that you pay attention to us because you're not going to forget us. And if I have to come and bring people to sit in your lobbies and lay down on your floors, you're going to keep talking about East Palestine until the peoples feel like the issues have been fixed. Governor DeWine sent spokespeople down here who will not have an answer for us. And since they can't have an answer for us because they aren't the person who makes the decision, he sent those people down here on purpose to make sure that we could just get some information to them and then he could say one day, oh, I actually didn't hear that. But what we will do is if I have to come up here once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, I will make sure I get into that damn office so Governor DeWine actually hears what the people are saying and what we're going to be doing.
I'm really impressed with the activists in East Palestine and also Pennsylvania. They're doing exactly what they need to do. and they need to be really persistent. It shouldn't have to be that way, but that's how things work in the United States of America today on environmental issues.
We must act now to ban petrochemicals like vinyl chloride and keep communities safe. If we don't address petrochemical pollution and situations like what happened in East Palestine, not only are we continuing to pollute communities that we live in every day, we're reversing all of the climate progress that we've made over the last decade.
What EPA mostly needs is political courage to stand up to the chemical industry. We cannot have another community go through what East Palestine has gone through in the last 6 months. This is not rocket science. This is political science. This is standing up to special interests, whether they're fossil fuel companies or big rail companies. But the American people deserve so much more than what we're getting right now. I think the big takeaway is your voices were heard, and we may hear this fall whether or not they're putting vinyl chloride on the list. They kind of hinted at it.
They hinted at it. I got the hint of it, but I also got the sense that we need you to keep pushing us so we can do this.
Right. And no worries, we're pushing.
Oh, we're pushers, so we're good.
We're here for the long term. This is a defining moment for the Biden administration. Do something bold, like ban vinyl chloride. That could be one positive that comes out of this extraordinary negative situation.
It is worth it to make sure that the people of East Palestine are heard and that they are taken care of, because they deserve that.
I don't care if I never get to enjoy another second of my life. Every bit of my time that's not being spent with my daughter or with my family is going to be spent fighting Norfolk Southern, fighting the EPA, fighting the government, fighting whoever I have to fight.
Oh my goodness. Maya and Drew and Roger and others, your whole team have made an amazing film. This is documenting history. I have goosebumps. Really incredible. Congratulations, everyone. A round of applause to the Years Project. I will ask Maya in a bit to tell us about her incredible film organization. I'm very moved by this, and I don't know how Hilary is going to take us to the next level of conversation here. I'm so grateful to have Hilary Flint with us tonight. Hilary is the Director of Communications and Community Engagement at Beaver County Marcellus Awareness Community, and she is the Vice President of Unity Council for the East Palestine train derailment. Hilary is a mission-driven leader with experience in community engagement, fundraising, and communications. As a cancer survivor and affected resident, she is determined to protect others from corporate greed and the health harms generated by the petrochemical industry. Thank you, Hilary, for being with us.
Yes, thank you, Judith. And I have to say, I've watched this a couple times now, and it never doesn't make me tear up. So incredibly moving, and I can't thank the Years Project enough for the work that they've done on the film. I did want to take some time to just explain the community piece of this, right? How did we organize? How did we get to Columbus and DC and all the different places we've been since this was made? It really just started in the beginning as affected residents. We really thought that we would be taken care of after this, right? You think the US government's going to take care of you. You think the EPA is going to take care of you. So in the first couple of months, I think a lot of us were hopeful. And once we realized that help was not coming, we decided to organize ourselves. So Unity Council was formed in April, a couple months after the derailment. And we're a grassroots group of affected residents from Ohio and Pennsylvania. We are not a nonprofit, but luckily I work for a nonprofit, BCMAC, and we've had wonderful help from partners, whether it's Breakthrough from Plastics, Beyond Plastics, OnlyOne. That's what keeps the work going. And none of us knew each other before this. And now I probably see this group of people before anyone else in my family. They are my new family now for sure. Our first step was just, hey, what do we need? What are our needs now? And what do we need in the future? So we came up with a list of demands and presented those at a press conference, which this documentary covers. The main point was we need some type of state of emergency or major disaster declaration. And we still have yet to actually receive that. We turned this into an action. We created a petition with one of our lovely partners, OnlyOne. And while we did get Ohio Governor DeWine did ask President Biden to declare an emergency. Currently, Biden has not done that yet. So we have 18,000 signatures. There's still many unmet needs. We have, as you saw, disrupted session in Columbus, Ohio. We have lobbied, state reps, senators, the EPA in DC. Jess, Jamie, and I went to New York City to connect with other advocacy groups. And next week, Jamie and I are going to New Orleans for the Pipeline Safety Trust Conference. We are going everywhere trying to get what our community needs. The EPA has still refused to do indoor air testing, despite complaints from residents of strong odors, despite the fact that independent research has shown chemicals of concern in homes. So my home here in Eden Valley, Pennsylvania, I'm just under 4 miles away from East Palestine. We found ethyl hexoacrylate in my home. There are other Pennsylvania homes that we found ethyl hexoacrylate in as recently as last month. So there are still a lot of unmet needs. Over 200 families are still displaced. People are continuing to get sicker, and we still don't have this major disaster declaration. So if there's anything you can do to support our community today, I really urge that you sign our petition. Maybe you tweet President Biden telling him, we still need help here, and maybe even write to your local elected representatives and let them do some work urging for our community. So I think this has been 9 months, and you would think there would be help, and you would think we would have answers. And unfortunately, the community just hasn't got everything we've needed.
Thank you so much, Hilary. And we will be sending out some resources to all of you tomorrow morning. Andrew just dropped the declaration in the chat, but don't worry. If you want to take action, and we suspect you will, we'll get you everything you need. It's now my great privilege to introduce Jessica Conard, who is a licensed speech language pathologist who was launched into grassroots advocacy last February, pretty recently, right after the toxic train derailment. Jess has been sought out as an expert, a credible community voice. She's been on many different national outlets talking about this crisis. I noticed her on CNN. She maybe less than a week after the derailment, CNN had a community town hall meeting on national TV, and the CEO of Norfolk Southern, Mr. Shore, was there, and a couple local residents. And this woman who I had met before got up and asked the most just devastating, precise question of the CEO. Jess asked him, is it common for the wheels of your trains to be on fire while they're moving through the community? And he didn't really have much of an answer. So Jess is working on national policy change for rail safety and to amplify initiatives for ecological security. We are so delighted that just a few months ago, she joined our staff at Beyond Plastics as our first ever Appalachia Director. She's going to help us eliminate plastic pollution everywhere, and in particular is working in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia to block the construction of chemical recycling facilities. That's a whole other saga, and a new report that we released on Halloween you can find on our website. So please welcome Jess Conard.
Thank you so much, Judith, for that lovely introduction. And thank you so much, Maya and the team, for making this amazing documentary. I am honored to be a panelist today. I was in the documentary. I was not interviewed, but those are my people. And if you don't see that on this panel, watch the documentary again. I want to talk to you a little bit about vinyl chloride. And I want to stress that, as Hilary said, my community in Ohio of East Palestine and border communities in Pennsylvania, we are still 9.5 months later begging for an emergency declaration from the president, and not necessarily because of a train derailment, but because of a purposeful spill and burn of vinyl chloride. We are not the only community that has been impacted by this chemical. In fact, vinyl chloride has impacted many communities across the nation for many years. Vinyl chloride is very hazardous to produce. It's obviously very hazardous to transport, as we saw in the derailment. And it's also very hazardous to dispose of. We've known about this chemical being a carcinogen for nearly 49 years. When this product is manufactured, it's generally manufactured in low-income communities, communities of color in Louisiana, Texas, and Kentucky. These areas are known as Cancer Alley. Vinyl chloride exposure is known to cause liver cancer. It's associated with lymphoma and leukemia. And it's not just cancer, it's also hormone disruption. Pregnant women have a high and increased risk of miscarriage, as we saw in the documentary, why Jamie was so determined to create a future for her daughters and for her nieces and nephews. We know that there's possibility of birth defects when exposed to these high levels of vinyl chloride in the air. And if you saw the plume, clearly there was at one point a very high level of this chemical in the air. 116,000 gallons of it was purposefully spilled into the soil and burned. But not only that, there were 700,000 gallons of it on the train. So this could have been a much larger issue. And if you have a railroad in or near your community, this could happen in your community. Vinyl chloride most likely runs on the train near you. Beyond Plastics and many other groups and communities are working together right now to ban this very dangerous chemical, and you can actually be a part of that work. I would urge you, we'll drop a link at some point to the petition to ban vinyl chloride. Every stage of this chemical causes havoc on environment and health. You can draw a straight line from what happened in East Palestine to the plastics industry, and that's because of the vinyl chloride. So vinyl chloride is used to produce PVC plastics. So these are your number 3 plastics. These are your PVC pipes, vinyl siding, windows, flooring, packaging, furniture, all sorts of things, toys that your kids chew on in the bathtub. When this product is burned, when PVC or vinyl chloride is burned, dioxins are formed, and there's really not a safe level of dioxins. This is a class of toxic chemicals that harms humans' health and environment. And if you consider anybody who knows a first responder, a firefighter, in the instance of a structure fire, because our homes are ingrained with this material inside and out, PVC is considered a very significant threat to firefighters. Since 2002, we know that almost 2 out of 3 firefighters who died in the line of duty didn't necessarily die from fighting the fire, they died from cancer. So PVC is a significant threat to the health of our first responders. PVC production facilities, as I had mentioned, are built predominantly in Black and low-income areas. And again, these are areas known as Cancer Alley. Since 2010, we know that there have been at least 40 chemical incidents worldwide involving the production of vinyl chloride and polyvinyl chloride plastics. This has killed over 70 people and injured over 600 people. This is a problem from the beginning to the end. When you break down a plastic product made from vinyl chloride, we have a process called chemical recycling, and this is probably the most egregious of them all. There are 11 of these facilities, chemical recycling facilities in the United States right now, and none of them are actually recycling any plastic. They're just providing more pollution to these spaces. Again, mostly low income and predominantly areas of color. I don't understand why this happened in my community, but I do understand that East Palestine is a symptom of a much larger issue. It is time for every single person on this call to join the fight to ban this chemical. You do not want to be in a position like East Palestine and the surrounding communities are in, where we are literally begging for an emergency declaration so that we can get the resources that we need, the medical testing, the air assessments for our homes. This is the position that we are in. We do not want you in it. So I would urge you again to urge the EPA to ban vinyl chloride.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jess. Really powerful. Maya Lilly is a producer of feature documentaries, and wow, did she make an amazing film that we were so privileged to share with you tonight. Maya works really hard to tell the story of the climate crisis and inspire audiences like you to action. She is on the staff with the YEARS Project, YEARS, the Emmy-winning team behind the TV series Years of Living Dangerously, produced by James Cameron. Their videos have been viewed over 1 billion times, the highest viewership in the climate space. Maya has also produced the TV docuseries Finding Justice, looking at injustices in Black communities, produced by the Rock's 7 Bucks Productions and BET, as well as The Big Fix about the BP Gulf oil spill. I want to go look that one up. I want to watch everything Maya has made. She has a real skill in creating media with climate organizers and is leading up a frontline BIPOC campaign following the people hit first and the people hit hardest by climate change. Maya Lilly, the YEARS Project.
Oh, thank you, Judith. And thank you everybody for being here. I saw the explosion like probably many of you did on Instagram. And my first thought was, why? I then reached out to members of the community, not only to see how they were doing, but which was not well, but also to find out what they were doing. And it turned out that they were doing a lot. So I'm a producer that I now use my experience in Hollywood. I call it like hacking the system to uplift climate narratives, particularly for frontline communities and BIPOC communities. And thanks to our Showtime show, we have this giant following. And so one of the largest in the climate movement. And so we're using that following to throw our weight behind climate actions and climate organizations that need it, such as Beyond Plastics, that have been doing the good work for years. And you can follow us at Years of Living, and me personally at Gung Ho Eco on all platforms. So in general, I find that people don't understand what a story is or how vital it is. And that's apparent by how few nonprofits and NGOs actually have like videographers on their comms teams. And I was recently at New York Climate Week, and I went to a bunch of storytelling panels. I was very excited for them. And I was listening to many people say things like, oh, we have to talk about our culture. Yes. Or we have to share how we feel about things. Yes. But a compelling story at its most basic level is someone facing a problem and figuring out what to do about it. So a character, a goal, and a conflict in the way of the goal resolution. It's not people talking about things. It's not a TED Talk. I spent years in LA in writers' rooms working my butt off to try to figure out what would make people watch something. And what the things that we always cut were people talking without action. So what unscripted producers do well is we approach stories with journalistic integrity. We want to know the research and the facts, but we look for all the same elements as fiction does. Urgency, high stakes, risk, emotional vulnerability, like Jamie on camera, good characters, conflict, suspense, action. There's a reason that you all watch Succession. The Kardashians are not as interesting as producers make them to be. And so when we are filming real things, we're focused on the doing. Right? So this story already had most of those things. I just had to find them during development and then pull them out in production. Like mine was the only camera in the room when they took over the Capitol, and Jess, had her sign ripped away from her, and Jamie got kicked out. And, she's saying, "Don't touch me." Ours was the only one filming. So when I work with a group like Unity Council, one of my first questions is, what are you doing in the next few months? Daniel's like, okay, we're marching to the Capitol to protest Mike DeWine's response to the disaster. Great, we will follow you. Then we look for things that make the story less complex to an audience, because activists are knee deep in the science, which can be really confusing. So it's like, all right, how would you explain this to your 10-year-old cousin? I'm constantly asking people to re-explain when I'm shooting. And then most importantly, I ask, what do you need a general audience's help with? There's nothing worse for me than watching a doc about a giant problem where you can have absolutely no way to help. And so that's a key piece that I think makes Years different than other documentary or journalist outfits, is we gift our work to the community because we deeply care about the outcome. And I'm wrapping this up, but I'll say this. I'm saying all of this about story because we are currently losing Earth. The climate fight is not going well. No country is meeting our current greenhouse gas emission agreements, and plastics is contributing immensely to the problem. So we need everything everywhere all at once. We need everyone to be better storytellers. We need you to talk to others about climate pollution. So please share this piece. It's why we made it, and we hope it'll help the community recover.
Thank you so much, Maya. Let's dig in a little bit more with that. How do you want all of us on this Zoom call to share the movie? Do we go to the Years website? Do we have permission to show it in our churches and synagogues and mosques? How can people get this amazing product out and lots of people looking at it?
Yeah, so we made the link at the end of the film, helpeastpalestine.us, specifically as a site where there's a bunch of stuff on there. There's the petition, for Biden. There's the EPA petition for vinyl chloride. There's the film, and then we have a social media pack where you can share on different social media channels.
So tell us again the webpage to go to.
Sure, I'll write it in the chat.
Great, because I know a lot of faces on the Zoom, and people are going to want to take action. Let's bring Jess Conard into the conversation now. We have information that EPA may make a very important decision in December related to vinyl chloride. That's why this webinar and the vinyl chloride event or webinar we're doing again on December 11th is so timely and so important. Jess, can you, we had people submit questions prior to tonight, and one of the questions is, why isn't the EPA banning vinyl chloride now? Is the industry holding them hostage somehow?
I would love for them to ban vinyl chloride right this minute. Unfortunately, we work on a backwards system in this country when it comes to chemicals. We use the chemical until we find out that there's a reason not to. And that's actually the process that the chemicals have to go through. There is a Toxic Substances Control Act, or TSCA. This is a process where chemicals are presented. It was put into place to regulate and to screen chemicals that are to prevent any unreasonable risks, whether that be to health or to environment. As Judith said, this is a really timely conversation. So in order for the EPA to ban vinyl chloride, it would have to go through this very rigorous TSCA process, which can take several years. We do expect the EPA to announce 5 new chemicals that will be placed on this list to determine if the chemical will be banned. So that is why we are urging you now to urge the EPA to take this very critical first step in banning this toxic chemical before any more harm is done to your community like it was done to mine.
Thanks, Jess. And Maya and her film crew followed us in Washington to the EPA meeting. It was a very, very hot day. That's why we were all drenched. And we had, I thought, a constructive conversation with the EPA. And at first they told us we might find out around Halloween if they're going to take action to start the process on whether or not to ban vinyl chloride. And now we're hearing that's December. And we want them to move, and we want them to pick vinyl chloride as one of the 5 chemicals. There are 99%, as Jess mentioned, 99% of vinyl chloride is used to make polyvinyl chloride or PVC plastic, and there are non-plastic alternatives for all of them. It's not going to be the end of the fight. It just starts a 5-year process. And there are a lot of special interests that will be in the halls of Congress and EPA trying to get EPA not to ban vinyl chloride. But my goodness, there's so much compelling scientific and health data. And it's terrible that this toxic train derailment happened, and it becomes a symbol of why we need to do this. Hilary, can you, there's a lot of media coverage on this, not immediately, but eventually the national press found their way to East Palestine. But I'm really curious, what's the situation on the ground now? You live in Enon Valley, Pennsylvania, about 4 miles from the toxic train derailment. Jess lives about 2-3 miles from the toxic train derailment. The media focus has dimmed a bit, but what's going on now, and are there ongoing health concerns, and what has the response been?
Yeah, I think what has shocked me about the media attention is that it hasn't really led to direct help for the community. So as citizen scientists, something we've been doing a lot is,
We go out, and I saw Randy DeHaven is on here. He's one of, we call them creek rangers. So he goes out, he films what the creeks looks like. There's a guy named Dr. Chai who gets those samples tested. We might get air monitors to put in people's homes, and the media covers all of these things, and it just doesn't seem to move the needle. It shocked me that the public pressure hasn't really worked. And as we aren't getting that assistance, the health symptoms have persisted. I have temporarily relocated from my home in Enid Valley. I'm here today, and all it has taken is one day of me being here for me to have a migraine, brain fog. The rashes haven't started yet, but I'm sure they will. So a lot of these cognitive issues, a lot of these, chronic pain, joint pain, upset stomach, autoimmune issues, or the elderly community and children, those people have it worse right now. And unfortunately, like I said, no amount of media attention has led to increased air testing or free healthcare coverage for people in the community. You mentioned I'm in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvanians don't even have access to the clinic that was set up in East Palestine. We also don't have a county health department. So all we have access to is a toxicology hotline that we call. So every day it just seems like we have more questions and no answers. And as that's going on, the people, our needs just aren't being met.
Yeah, I'm so very sorry to hear this. Jess, when you look out the window right behind you where those white drapes are, you see the train tracks. And you hear the train go by all the time, which I would just kind of send me into a state of panic. Can you talk a little bit about what's it like at your house?
Yeah, so the train was just kind of a part of our everyday lives. It was the background hum, I guess you could say. We kind of liked having the train around. The kids liked it. It's just ingrained in every memory that we have. And now it feels like a trauma, a micro trauma. Every train that passes, every Norfolk Southern logo, it's very challenging. And the big kids understand, but the little kids don't. And, the little kids are excited to see the train. And I think it's really hard and aggravating and dividing, not just for families, but for the community as a whole, who to trust and how to go about managing and navigating the future. This has not been easy. I don't enjoy the train anymore. I guess that's where I'll say.
That's understandable. And the reason why we're making this connection to plastics is because the plastics industry is planning to produce significantly more plastics in the next 5 to 10 years. That means more toxic chemicals being transported on a rickety rail system. And that's why banning vinyl chloride is so very important. The thing that got me really interested in this emergency situation was the decision to drain the toxic vinyl chloride into ditches, purposely set it on fire, foolishly calling it a controlled burn. If you look at that black plume, it was not controlled. I'm certainly sympathetic to public safety officials who were concerned that the train cars might explode, but we have since learned from the owner of the vinyl chloride that was not a risk. And at a US Senate hearing, we heard the emergency response director from a nearby Pennsylvania county, Mr. Brewer, saying that when he started to hear about whether these train cars would be put on fire, he always heard that it was going to be one train car. And in his words at a US Senate hearing, his jaw dropped when he heard it was 5 train cars. So prior to establishing Beyond Plastics, I served as an EPA regional administrator during the Obama administration and dealt with train derailments, including vinyl chloride. And the standard operating procedure was you stop the train traffic, you evacuate anyone nearby who needs to be evacuated, and then you bring in these vacuum trucks and you suck the chemicals out and you bring the chemicals to a commercial hazardous waste disposal facility. Suboptimal, often they're polluting, but it's better than just having it, callously released into the environment. So a big question I have that I want to pose to all of you is, why do you think the decision was made to drain this chemical into local ditches and put it on fire as the way to deal with it? What do you think prompted that? And Hilary or Jess, you want to start?
Yeah, I can answer. I think the reason is we don't know. We don't know why they leaked 5 cars of vinyl chloride instead of 1. The incident commander of the EPA has repeatedly stated why 5 cars. Many have said that it was to get a train through. The battalion chief in Youngstown has been quoted saying that we nuked a town to get a train through. And while I understand, that our country requires a robust rail system for our economy to function, this really should not have come at the cost to my community, to the environment, to our health. And this is not just that week or this year. This is going to be many years, many generations will have to manage this pollution. I have seen, the NTSB hearing. I was not present, but the National Transportation Safety Board hearing, or NTSB. I did hear the owner of the vinyl chloride oxyvinyls provide alternative recommendations to manage that vinyl chloride rather than release it and burn it. That was just not necessary. We still have a lot of questions surrounding that. It does seem like the battalion chief was right. We nuked a town to get a train through with blatant disregard to the community members that live here and that have lived here for generations.
And I think, to piggyback off of what Jess said, something interesting that came up during a meeting with Bernie Sanders' team while we were in DC was that once they released that vinyl chloride, the owner of that vinyl chloride now has shared liability when it comes to future legal cases. So now oxyvinyl has to be a part of these lawsuits with Norfolk Southern. And I just thought that was a really interesting angle that I hadn't thought about in the past, that once it leaves that train car, it is now considered a waste product, which then puts kind of that liability back on the original owner.
Wow. And I would like to just add, we reached out to Mayor Conway. I reached out to the head of the EPA in that region. I reached out to Norfolk Southern, and I reached out to the fire department, and nobody wanted to interview.
All right, I'm going to run through some quick questions here from one attendee. On the west side of the Hudson River in New York, trains carry chemicals and fuel, including, we know, Bakken crude. How do I find out what is being transported? How can communities push for safety to prevent explosion and destruction?
That's a great question. I'm not sure specifically about water transportation, but I do know, as far as I understand,
this is trains.
Oh, this is trains. Okay.
Along the Hudson.
As I understand, knowing what is on the train is a matter of national security. Because of what is being transported on the trains, it is not public knowledge because it they're basically bomb trains sometimes, like what you saw in East Palestine. And this has occurred in multiple places throughout the nation as well, when a train derails and there are chemicals on it. I do know that our first responders have been provided with an app called Ask Rail, so that in the event of a future emergency, they'll be able to access the contents of the train rather than wait for the manifest, which is what happened within the first few hours of the emergency response for the derailment here. But as far as I understand, it's not something that we are privy to as the public.
So let's put a finer point on that. So your local first responders get the call to come to the train tracks. There's a derailment, there are fires. They did not know what was on fire. They didn't know, it was one thing if you're transporting soybeans or corn, but they didn't know what they were facing. For hours, did you just say, Jess?
Yeah, correct. The placards that were on the train cars were destroyed or melted, and the manifest was not available for several hours following the derailment. So the 60, 63, 62 fire stations that responded, nobody had any idea what they were fighting.
Wow. We have a number of questions about what are alternatives to PVC plastic? If EPA does the responsible thing and starts the process of banning vinyl chloride, what can be replaced? What are the replacement materials? So again, over 99% of vinyl chloride is used to make PVC, polyvinyl chloride plastic. Some of the major uses are piping for your own drinking water, and alternatives to PVC pipes. And Beyond Plastics just published a report last April, The Perils of PVC Piping. Alternatives include stainless steel, copper, recycled copper. And if your town is replacing lead service lines, you should find out what is the replacement material that they're using. We tried to engage with the EPA to get them to tell local governments don't replace it with PVC piping, but EPA won't weigh in on the replacement material, which is most unfortunate. Other uses are in like flooring and vinyl siding. So there's a whole bunch of alternatives to vinyl. You can have some very nice wood floors. Firefighters are quite concerned about fighting fires in homes that have vinyl siding. Other uses are packaging, including packaging for food. And some of the major companies in this country have said that they will voluntarily stop using PVC packaging for food in the next few years. We don't think voluntary pledges are enough. There should be a law to prevent that. And then another major use is children's toys. So let's not have our kids chewing on PVC plastic. Toys can be made of many, many materials that are not PVC plastic. Children's toys are especially on my mind, and that should be low-hanging fruit for the EPA. I'm just barreling through one more question here because it's getting late. I want to go to Maya. I mean, you touched on this a little bit, but thank you for focusing so much on the climate crisis. I mean, this year is lining up to be the hottest year on record, and all of the cascading health and ecological implications of that. There's a lot you could cover in the world. I mean, every day you turn on the news and there's another compelling story with a compelling narrative. You put your heart and soul into this film. It wasn't easy. It was demanding. What prompted you to start on this? Why did this get on your to-do list as opposed to other climate-related issues?
Well, so I was looking for frontline and BIPOC climate stories we received a grant that's kind of unheard of in the film industry to gift that to communities that need it, you know, so like Hollywood level stuff, like here you go, use it for campaigns, for fundraising, whatever. So I was looking for stories, and we had done stories about push for community solar, or like greening houses, journalists that were fighting their utility in Florida, and the utility that was influencing elections. And this happened in February, and I felt like the media was really missing some of the key questions that I wanted to know, like, is the community getting sick? Like, are people being monitored? What are scientists finding out from the water? And so that kind of piqued my curiosity. But then also, what I loved about this story was that it was local. It was local community members that they weren't necessarily activists and organizers before this. So they had this huge learning curve, which is something that is a universal story to root for. It's people love the underdog, and and so there was this push of like, oh my God, our officials are not helping us. We have to level up really fast and figure out how to do this. And I thought that was really important and fascinating. Plus, there was an urgency that they needed this to get help.
Yeah, well, we hope that your film is watched by millions of people, including policymakers and environmental regulators. They need to see this. Hilary and Jess, I am particularly thinking about you and your families. A year ago, coming up to Thanksgiving, you were probably thinking about how big is the turkey going to be, who in the family is going to make the apple pies. And this Thanksgiving, you have so much more on your mind. And Hilary, you shared with us tonight that you're not even in your home most of the time. So can you tell us in as much detail as you can, Hilary and Jess, what can we do to support your communities? People around the country, we often don't, we see these situations, we often don't know what to do. So be very specific and don't be shy. What do you want us all to do?
Yeah, I will start. Actually, today, Unity Council has announced that along with my organization, BCMAC, we will be hosting a Thanksgiving dinner for residents displaced or affected by the train derailment. So I will drop that link in the chat if anyone wants to donate or share it with someone local that they know. That would be greatly appreciated. As of right now, we have funding to feed 100 people, which I'm really happy about that. And any money raised from that campaign, we're working on a Christmas campaign to try to get water filters or some type of air monitors in people's homes. So that's a really, a good way to help affected residents right now. And then, of course, long-term, signing our disaster declaration petition and amplifying our stories, which includes this wonderful documentary that Maya put together. And if there's speaking opportunities, invite us. Jess and I are always interested in getting the story out. And my wonderful, amazing, passionate colleague, Jamie Wallace, who was in this documentary, is just an absolutely beautiful, impactful, emotional speaker. And any more opportunities we have to get her to share what it's like being a mother fighting this fight, and also having, her entire family's in East Palestine, very similar to Jess. Just the more opportunities we have to amplify the voices of the people in East Palestine and Beaver County that were affected by this.
Thanks. And I would just add, we should all send the link to this film to our members of Congress. We should all write about this film in our local letters to the editor section of newspapers. People still read the letters to the editor, and also post about this on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. I'm never going to call it the other name. Jess, any final words from you? What can we all do as a community to help your community?
I am not surprised that Hilary wants to feed the community. This is her heart and soul. She just wants to nourish everyone everywhere she goes. So I think for me, it's a matter of getting the word out. So you could host a screening in your community of this documentary. That is an easy thing to do. Call up your library, maybe the school or a church building, a place with a projector, and show this documentary to members of your community to let them know what is actually happening here. I love the idea of sending the link to your elected officials. Write a letter to the editor. Start educating your community about the dangers of how East Palestine is a symptom of a much larger issue. Hilary is working at the local level as well as the state level, and I'm kind of working more on the state and national level, I think, when it comes to East Palestine. So it's going to take all of the collaborative effort from each one of you to really get this word out, because if we don't use East Palestine to set the precedent, then this is going to happen again as it has in the past, and your community could potentially be next. So it's time to get involved. If you've never been involved, it's time to get involved now.
Thank you. So thanks to all three of you. We're going to wrap up. My colleague, Melissa Valiant, is going to share with you a model letter to the editor on the topic of vinyl chloride. We have a template letter we want you to look at and submit. Most importantly, look at Help East Palestine, www.helpeastpalestine.us. I learned so much tonight. I am so grateful to you, powerful women. Remember, well-behaved women never make history. One of my favorite quotes. The thing that I'm going to really reflect on tonight is something that Hilary Flint just said 5 minutes ago, that she is doing fundraising to be able to pay for water filters and air monitors in people's homes for Christmas. This is where we are as a nation. Thank goodness for this mutual aid work, but it's also fair to say, why aren't government agencies providing this and sending the bill to Norfolk Southern? And we need to hold Norfolk Southern accountable. EPA has brought an enforcement case against them, which is great, but EPA deals with environmental damage, not human health and suffering. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We hope to see you in a few weeks. Keep going with us on vinyl chloride, December 11th, 7 p.m. It's going to be hard to top this one. Congratulations to the Years Project, and thank you for the honor of letting us debut the film tonight. Good night, everyone.